All right, so I want to create a mask now so that I can create this effect of this paint spray material potentially being eroded or chipped and then revealing this underlying metal material. So the reason why we always want to be using masks for things such as this, but not necessarily limited to this, is that masks allow us to work in what we refer to as a non-destructive way, meaning that I can create this look of something being chipped away while still fully preserving all the work that I've done in that material itself. Okay, and it's really the same for things like Photoshop and all of that. So I'm going to be referencing Photoshop quite a lot because of all the similarities that these two programs have. So to create a mask, I want to right-click on the layer that I want to have masked, and then at the very top I can choose. I can say either add a white mask or a black mask. So if I add a white mask, then essentially all of this layer will still be revealed. Where if I add a black mask, all of it's going to be concealed. Okay, so let's just have a look at that black mask. This isn't really helping me, particularly when I consider what it is I'm trying to do. I'm trying to just paint in scratches. By selecting a black mask, this is actually creating a lot more work for me, because now I'm going to have to actually go in and paint all the areas that actually do have the paint spray. So I don't want this. I actually want the white mask. All right. So I can just right click on this mask again, and I can simply just say add a white mask, and it will automatically change it. Okay. So that's also quite important for you to just keep in mind. The other thing before I carry on any further that I want you to take note of is if we have a look over here by the layers, our mask, when we're painting in our mask, it is not related in any way to whatever channel we are currently in with the layers. Okay, so notice how I'm in the base color channel and I can paint my mask, and if I change this to normal, notice how I can still paint my mask. Okay, so painting in a mask is not dependent on whatever channel we are currently viewing inside of the layers. Let me just undo that. Okay, so when it comes to actually painting in the mask, notice that the icon is active, and this means that we can choose to paint within that actual mask over there, right? But the way that I prefer to work, because I find that my painting, a lot of the time it ends up using far more than just a single layer of paint. I like to build things up. All right. So the way that I prefer to work is to rather right click on this mask, and I'm going to be creating what we can refer to as a stack. And what that means is that that mask is in itself going to be comprised of a few different levels that I'm just going to slowly build up. Okay. Levels or layers, I should rather say, of painting. So if we right click on it and we head over here to the bottom, we can see that we have a number of different options that we can use. We can use things such as generators, which we haven't covered yet. We can add a paint layer. We can add a fill layer. And then there's a number of other options, and we're going to get to this, all right? But the one that I'm just going to choose for now is I'm going to say a paint layer. And notice how it adds that paint layer within that mask. So we can visually now see it, and I find this to be the best way to work. We can also double click on it, and we can label this as, base, or give it any name that is descriptive, that you understand what it is that is being painted into that. And with this layer now selected, we can paint into the mask, like so. And what's important to note is that that layer that we added, it's called a paint layer because, as the name suggests, it allows us to physically paint onto that layer. Now, not every thing that we create inside a substance works that way. Okay. For instance, if we had to create a fill doesn't allow you to actually paint into it. But what a fill allows you to do is to either fill that channel with a single color, or we can actually drop a map into that. Okay. So let me actually show you this, because it's really useful. So I'm going to right click on that base layer, because what I'm wanting to do now is I'm wanting to add this additional layer in, right? So I'm going to right click on it, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on fill. And now it's added this fill layer above that. Now immediately notice how that fill layer is kind of now almost covering what we have painted here inside of this base. Okay, and with the full layer selected, if we come down here to the properties, we can see that this full layer, the way that it operates is that by default it is quite literally filled, as the name suggests, with a single color. And if I make that color white, well then guess what? When it comes to a mask, white reveals, right? Black conceals and white reveals. So if I had to take this and if I had to drag it the other way and make it black, notice how this full layer is now making all of that metal underneath come through. Now, this can be kind of useful, but a lot of the time it's also kind of boring if we just use a single color. Instead, what we can do is we can actually head on over to the left-hand side again under Assets, and we have this option here that if we click on it, these are what we refer to as procedural materials or maps that we can drop into where it says grayscale over here. And what these procedural maps do is they apply some other form of noise or some other kind of pattern that can actually help to create a lot of interesting detail. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to go and I'm going to drag this black and white spots 3, and I'm going to drag it over so that it's over this grayscale box over here. Notice how it highlights, and then I'm just going to drop it in there. Okay, and immediately we can kind of see something interesting happening in that noisy material is now creating this very sort of random weathered kind of feel where we can see bits of the paint coming through while most of it is obscured. Now we can adjust this this noise map if we look at our properties over here. If we just scroll down a little bit, we've got sliders for things like balance as well as contrast and even scale, and then we've got something called disorder. So these are all things that we can just kind of play around with. So notice how for the balance, if I kind of move the balance more towards 1, notice how we start to get less erosion, but it still looks kind of cool. We can still see that this if done correctly, we can really help to build this up and make this look like something that has been maybe outside or something like that. The point being is that these procedural materials, when coupled with a full layer, they help to create a level of detail that would otherwise take longer for us to physically paint. Okay. We also have this thing called contrast. So contrast is, as the name suggests, we all know what that is. That's just going to either soften those edges or harden those edges up. And then scale. So scale is actually going to adjust this noise pattern itself, right? So as I increase the scale, notice how these patches, they become smaller and smaller, right? Whereas if I take it back to 1, the patches are bigger. So that noise pattern is literally just being scaled up or scaled down. And then that is what's creating that adjustment. Now the final thing that I want us just to look at with regards to the relationship between a fill and a paint layer is that we can have the two work together. Okay, it's not a case of having one or the other. You can use a full layer to create a base, and then you can then create a paint layer over that to then paint on top of it. So I'm going to just ditch this base layer because it was really just a test more than anything else. And then I'm going to right click on this full layer, and I'm just going to once again say add a paint layer over here. And notice how if I now start to paint over this, I can add my own painting effect over and above the full layer that's underneath that. Now obviously I would want to use the correct brush and that sort of thing. So let me just go ahead to this brush section or palette of our assets window, and I'm thinking that maybe something like dirt or something like that could actually work fairly well. So I'm just going to grab this dirt brush here. You can just click on it once and then it helps to select that, and I can come in and I can maybe start to just what I'm going to call maybe enhance some of these areas, like so. Like maybe I wanted that particular patch to be a little extra weathered. And then perhaps I'm wanting some of these areas here to also just be a little bit more worn down, like so. And I think you get the point of what it is that I'm getting to here. So by default, their blend layers will automatically work together quite nicely, but there might be occasions in which, particularly if we're using multiple full layers, that the normal blending mode isn't going to allow for those two layers to just play together automatically. So let's have a quick look at how it is that we can incorporate an additional fill layer while still maintaining what this fill layer is actually doing. All right, so let's just have a little bit of fun with this. I know that it might feel a bit confusing at first, like I'm maybe just rushing ahead a little bit, but this is really us just kind of playing around and just exploring and then learning as we go. So we created the fill, we created the paint, and now I want to right click on the paint and I want to create another fill over there, okay? And much like what the first fill did, comes in with this 50% gray color, which half reveals and half conceals things. All right. So we don't want to use the fill as a solid color. We want to now drop another interesting little map in here. So let's click on our procedural patterns, and I'm thinking maybe one of the grunges. So this list is quite long, everyone. So there's a lot of stuff in here for you to use. So I'm going down to where it says G, and I'm looking for grunges. Okay, so this grunge concrete material, this could actually work quite well. So instead of dropping this onto the figure, which you could do, but then you also risk Substance assuming that this grunge procedural texture is actually meant to be like a color material. Okay, so we don't want that. We want to drag it onto the grayscale box over here of the fill channel. Okay, so we can see that once we've done that, we get this result. And if we come down to where we find our little controls for balance and contrast, then we can see that we can start to adjust this. And this actually looks pretty cool. There's some really nice patterning that looks quite natural that comes out here. I like these little divots and this sort of wear and pitting that this grunge material is creating. All of these procedurals, well, no, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are created from scan data. So the reason why they look so damn good is because a lot of this has been scanned from photographs and like actual instances in the real world of these particular effects. Okay, so coming back to the main point here is that we've got these two fill layers, and if I just disable the visibility icon of this fill layer, notice how much is being overridden, right? So if I make this one visible, the top one, it's kind of becoming all about this effect. And that's not really what I want. What I'm actually wanting is I'm wanting this effect to be blended in to this effect over here, okay? So it really just comes down to the layer blending itself. And because we're working with masks, a lot of the time what's either going to work is using either a multiply blend layer or using a linear dodge. And it's just going to depend on whether or not the information that we are or have created, did we create it using a black mask or a white mask. Now, for us, what's going to work in this case is multiply. Okay. And we can see that as soon as we do that, we've now got the effects of this first fill layer over here that is now working alongside this one over here. And the best bit about all of this is that I can still go back to my paint and I can still continue to actually paint in. All right, so this is like really powerful and a great way to generate some awesome detail. So I'm going to end this part of the video here. And although this one has been a little bit longer, hopefully it's really kind of just shown you and helped you just to kind of get your feet wet with using paint layers and fill layers and how they're actually really powerful and how you can get them to generate some really awesome detail quickly.